You type a question into AI, you get an answer. The answer covers what you asked. And then you read it and you feel like something's off. Like the answer could have come from anywhere and written by no one in particular. But here's the thing, that feeling is information. It's telling you something specific about what happened inside the model when it generated that response. And once you understand what it's pointing to, you'll know exactly how to fix it every time. Here's the mistake most people are making without realizing it. They send a prompt with a clear question and zero context about who should answer it. Think about what that means at the model level. AI learned from an enormous amount of text written by real people, experts, amateurs, generalists, specialists. When you send a prompt, the model pulls from all of it simultaneously. Every voice, every level of expertise, every frame of reference it has ever encountered on that topic. And when everything is equally available, the output defaults to the middle, the answer that fits the widest range of inputs. That's not a flaw. That's the model doing exactly what it's designed to do. The issue is the prompt gave it no reason to do anything else. Here's an example of what that produces. The prompt. What should I include in a job posting for a customer service manager? It's a clear question, defined subject, nothing wrong with it on the surface. But what comes back is the statistical average of every job posting the model has ever processed. Job title, responsibilities, required qualifications, communication skills, problem solving, clear application process. Technically, it's complete, but it's genuinely forgettable. And notice what's absent. There's no judgment about what separates a compelling posting from one that gets ignored. There's no insight into what strong candidates actually look for. The model gave you the average because average is what the broadest pattern produces. This is the mechanism behind that outcome, and it's worth understanding clearly. AI is a pattern completion engine. When you send a prompt, the model looks at everything it's seen that relates to your question and generates a response that fits those patterns. The more specific and constrained those patterns are, the more specific and useful the output. Without a role assigned, there's no filter on which patterns to prioritize. Every HR guide, every job board template, every career advice article is equally weighted. The model resolves that into the broadest match. That's the average, and that's exactly what you got. But role-based prompting changes that. And the most important thing to understand about it is what it's actually doing. Assigning a role isn't about making AI perform or pretend. It's a filter on the pattern pool. When you tell the model to respond as a specific type of expert, you're telling it, draw from this cluster of knowledge, apply this frame of judgment, weight these considerations as important. The output changes because the starting point changes. A narrower pattern pool produces a more specific answer. That's the entire mechanism. And it's why this works every time. Here's why that works at the level of how the model actually learned. AI trained on text written by real people in specific roles. An experienced HR director writes differently than a recruiter. A recruiter brings different priorities than a hiring manager. Each role carries a distinct vocabulary, a distinct frame of reference, a distinct sense of what matters and what's obvious. When you assign a role, you activate that specific slice of the model's training. The voice, the vocabulary, the judgment that person would apply. The role acts as a key that opens a specific section of the model's knowledge, rather than leaving every door open at once. Consider what changes when you add a role to the prompt from earlier. Without a role, the model has no frame of reference, no standard to reason against. no lens for deciding what counts as a good answer. It generates the average because that's what the broadest pattern produces. With a role assigned, a specific knowledge cluster is activated. The model isn't drawing from everything anymore. It's drawing from the expertise, vocabulary, and judgment of a specific type of person. And that changes what it decides to include, what it decides to emphasize, and what it considers worth saying at all. And there's one more layer worth adding on top of the role, and it's part of that moves an answer from specific to genuinely useful. The prompt we're using doesn't assign a role and stop there. It also includes this: focus on what separates postings that attract strong candidates from those that attract anyone who needs a job. That's a criterion, a standard. It tells the model not just who to be, but what that person would use as their measure of quality. A role alone narrows the pattern pool. A role with a clear criterion gives AI a way to evaluate, not just compile. It changes what gets prioritized, what gets left out, and what the output is actually trying to accomplish. That combination is what moves the output from adequate to genuinely useful. We've got two prompts coming. The question is identical in both. The first has no role assigned. Watch for what the model defaults to when every pattern is equally available. The second adds a specific role and a judgment criterion. Watch how the starting point changes what the model decides to surface. The contrast between the outputs isn't subtle. Pay attention to the depth, the angle, and the specificity of what each one actually tells you. The weak prompt. What should I include in a job posting for a customer service manager? The output: include a job title, responsibilities, required qualifications, and company information. Mention skills like communication and problem solving. Include compensation if possible and a clear application process. Every item on that list is something a general search result would tell you. There's no judgment about what matters most. No insight into what strong candidates actually look for. No standard applied to separate a compelling posting from one that blends into every other listing on the board. The model gave you a technically complete answer because that's the safest response when the pattern pool is wide open. It covered the bases. It didn't give you a reason to write a better posting. So here's the strong prompt. You are an experienced HR director who is hired for customer-facing leadership roles at mid-sized companies. What should I include in a job posting for a customer service manager? Focus on what separates postings that attract strong candidates from those that attract anyone who needs a job. The output: strong candidates scan for signals that a company actually manages its service team rather than just staffing it. Lead with scope, team size, escalation authority, metrics owned. Be specific about growth path. Avoid listing every soft skill. Candidates who take service leadership seriously know those are assumed. That's a different category of answer. It's not giving you a checklist. It's giving you a frame of judgment. What strong candidates are actually evaluating when they decide whether to keep reading. The role activated a standard the model had no reason to apply before. It reasoned from a specific position rather than averaging across all of them. The question didn't change, the pattern pool did. And that's everything. The mechanism laid out plainly: a prompt with no role pulls from the broadest available pattern pool and produces the broadest available answer. A prompt with a role assigned activates a specific knowledge cluster, the vocabulary, the priorities, the judgment standards of that type of expert, and produces an answer from that position. The role didn't change what you asked. It changed where the model went to answer it. Here's the transferable principle from this video. A role is a filter on the pattern pool. Assigning one narrows which knowledge the model draws from and which standards it applies. The more specific the role, the more specific the knowledge cluster it activates. That's all that's happening. There's no prompt magic involved. But your judgment is what makes it work. You choose the role. AI uses what you give it. An HR director and a talent acquisition specialist are both in hiring, but they bring different lenses to the same question. A financial analyst and a CFO both know finance, but they reason at different levels of abstraction. Before you assign a role, ask yourself who is actually the best person to answer this. Whose specific experience and standards would produce the most useful output for what you're trying to accomplish? That question is yours. AI can't answer it for you because it doesn't know what you're trying to accomplish until you tell it. One thing you can do differently starting today. Before you send any prompt where the quality of the answer matters, pause and ask who is the best person to answer this. Picture the actual expert, the job title, the level of experience, the area of focus. Then name that role at the start of your prompt. You are a is what activates a different starting point. And if you can name not just the role, but the standard that role would apply, what separates good from great in their world, add that too. That's the combination that shifts the output from technically correct to genuinely useful. The role narrows the pattern pool. The criterion gives the model a way to evaluate, not just include. Role-based prompting is foundational in this series because it applies to almost every prompt you'll ever write. Anytime the quality of the answer matters, there's a role that would make it better. And now you understand why. The next video covers contextual prompts, the most underused ingredient in prompting, and the one that forces the model out of the average faster than almost anything else. If this video helped, subscribe so you catch this one when it goes up. Templates for every technique in the series are at eauclairai.com. If you want to work through prompting for your specific business, reach out to us at Eau Claire AI directly. And thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.